We know that this is a particularly sensitive issue this afternoon. It's going to be difficult to hear some of the information that's shared with everyone. I do urge you, if you find this hard, please speak to your managers, people who are able to support you and allow you to have those conversations about what you've heard this afternoon, and the same issue around being supported with colleagues who also may find some of this difficult. It's hard listening and there's a lot for us to learn, so please, we just need all of us to be mindful of that. But as we start the afternoon, I'm now going to introduce you to the people involved in this, all the partners, the key partners in Walsall Safeguarding Partnership, who are going to talk us through the issues. Each has a duty in the presentation and taking a different turn on different elements of it. And I'm going to do this on the basis of the pictures I have on my screen. So I will start with Colleen.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Colleen Mail. I'm the Director of Children's Social Work at Walsall Council, so I have responsibility for all of the social work teams, residential services in Walsall. Welcome this afternoon.
Thanks, Colleen. Maria?
Hello, everybody. Maria Kilcoyne. I'm Associate Director for Safeguarding and Partnerships with the Black Country and West Birmingham CCG.
Thank you. Kellyanne?
Hi everybody, I'm Kellyanne Perry. I'm the Practice Improvement Lead for Walsall Safeguarding Partnership, and my role is about being responsible for progressing the work of the partnership in relation to all the training development.
Thank you. And Lucy?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Detective Chief Inspector Lucy Kerwin from West Midlands Police. I have geographical responsibility for child protection units based in both Wolverhampton and Walsall.
Thank you very much indeed, Lucy. Thank you. Can I have the next slide, please, Sarah? And I'm just going to explain how this event is going to run this afternoon. The purpose of our event this afternoon is to learn what happened to Arthur and Star during their short lives and to understand how agencies reacted to try and protect those two little ones. We want to try and understand what this means for Walsall, and to understand the potential of the learning about locally and nationally about what the future holds for us and what we need to do, and to bring you up to speed to some extent with what we've done already in Walsall to try and just can I just remind everyone to switch off their microphones and their cameras? Thank you. So I'm going to start the afternoon with why we're here, the function of the Safeguarding Partnership, because I think it's important that we understand the context in which we all work. We're going to hear from Colleen, who's going to talk us through Arthur's story, and Maria, who will talk us through Star's. Then we're going to hear about what local learning arises from those, from both the police and the local authority and the health perspective. Then we've got Lucy talking us through what the national recommendations might be, and there are some very significant issues in there. And then I'll come back and explain to you what we've done so far in Walsall as a partnership and what we need to continue to do and improve on. And then finally, at the end of the afternoon, Kellyanne is going to be talking you through what learning is available to everyone. And I do urge you to listen to that and participate in it, because the learning that we have is developed as a result of what we've learned from our audits and what we've learned from our reviews and other national reviews. So it's all really pertinent and relevant training, and it's really helpful for you in your practice and your day-to-day work to tap into that training and take advantage of it.
Sally, you're on mute. Sorry, I think someone might have muted you there.
I don't know when it went. When did I go on mute? Okay, I will remind everyone about why we're here. We're here because Arthur and Star were both horribly murdered in 2020 as a result of sustained abuse and neglect by their caregivers. There's been lots of horrible things on the telly, harrowing videos and footage of the horrible things that they experienced in the last few weeks, days and months of their lives. And that's led to a national question about how can this have happened when they were apparently in the plain sight of public agencies. So the national review was introduced in order to understand the key threads that came out of both those sad sets of events, and to try and help us look as a whole system about how we might get this better. So there's a whole partnership context to all of this to understand. So I think it's pertinent if you can also understand what the partnership context is for you in Walsall, so that you know how we all work together. We know that no single agency can protect children. We all have to work as part of a wider system, and partnership strategy and governance forms a really significant framework for all of you in your daily life and your daily work, no matter what your role is and what agency you are working in. So I'm just going to briefly remind you what the Safeguarding Partnership context is here in Walsall, so you know how all this fits into the Walsall context. So I hope you can see this. This just gives you an outline of the structure of how the partnership sits in Walsall. You will see there that the orange boxes, all those people, the wider community that we need to be cognizant of, those people that we are trying to safeguard and protect. We have a safeguarding executive group, which is a very small group, which sets the strategy and oversees the working of the partnership. The group that sits around that is operations and scrutiny. That is a much wider group. It has membership of directors of different authorities, voluntary sector, lots of different agencies, etc. And they understand and drive forward in practice some of the recommendations that come out of the various bits of work that the partnership is undertaking. And then you will see under that there are 6 different subgroups working on different elements of partnership work. At the moment, the priorities for the partnership are neglect in children, all age exploitation and self-neglect in adults, and there are separate groups driving that work forward. But we also have performance and quality assurance groups for children and adults, practice development group, which undertakes the training and learning development that I talked about earlier, and practice review, which is the group that undertakes on behalf of us all, everyone, the reviews about services when things go wrong. So that's serious case reviews in old money, practice reviews now, and SARS for adults. So there are those very big strands of work, and that's how the system is structured to undertake some of this. Some of you will be directly or indirectly involved in some of this work, or you will be learning from it, because the learning that comes out of this and a lot of the documents and the 7-minute briefings and all the rest of it is produced by this system, and its purpose is to understand what our position is in Walsall, to learn from what we understand, and to make sure that we can all improve our practice and make sure we're as joined up as we can be. If people are interested in getting involved in that work, we are always delighted to hear from people interested to participate in any of that. Can we have the next slide, please? So as I've said, we cannot work in isolation. We need to work with other sets of arrangements, and this is the wider context in Walsall that we engage with. And you can see from here, there will be different things that different members of you recognise and understand. So we have Community Safety Partnership, which is currently chaired by the police, which looks at all matters to do with obviously community safety, exploitation and all that kind of thing. Health and Wellbeing speaks for itself, Violence Reduction Unit, Scrutiny, which is political, Walsall Together, health committees, Youth Offending Partnership, etc. There are many, many partnerships working together, and we have been working hard in the last year at making sure the crossovers are more understood, and that we are therefore able to join up work and service delivery more effectively as a result of that.
Excuse me, we can't see the slides.
Okay, are there none of them that you've been able to see, or have we just lost them?
I think a lot of people can. I think it might be down to individuals. I think you might need to try leaving and probably coming back on, but the slides are on there.
Okay, thank you. So the next slide, please, tells us who we've got on the executive, and this reflects the importance that the key agencies hold safeguarding in regard. So we have at the moment Kerry Allwood, who is the DAS, the Director of Adult Services, who is the current chair of the executive. Previous chair was Sally Rowe, the Director of Children's Services, and she is a member. Then we have Sally Roberts, who is the Chief Nurse for Black Country and West Country Birmingham CCG. Chief Superintendent Phil Dolby, and I am in attendance at the meeting. So you will see from that that we have very high senior strategic leads who are actively involved in the direction of the services safeguarding children and adults in Walsall. And it's important to recognise that we do have that very significant senior sign up. I mentioned briefly before, can I have the next slide please, that our three priorities at the moment are those all age exploitation, neglect and self-neglect. But as a partnership, we undertake audits, case reviews, research, etc. in all aspects of protection. And indeed, one of the recent audits that we did coincidentally was bruising in non-mobile babies. And as it happens, of course, that's entirely pertinent to the STAR case. But we do try to learn from what our own audits are telling us in terms of lessons and practice development opportunities that we can share with you all, so that we all understand the position and we all get every opportunity to learn as best we can from what's been happening both locally and nationally. My next slide is a slightly different take on how we would normally do something like this. We've got nearly 400 people in this call this afternoon, so sadly we can't do question and answer unless we all want to stay here for a very, very long time. So we won't be doing Q&A, but instead we thought it was useful to you to have some reflective questions in your mind as we go through the afternoon. And they are that we thought it'd be useful for you to think, and I'm sure this will come out of what you hear, how you work with other agencies to make sure you build up a really good and informative picture of what's happening in that child's life. What behavioural biases might be impacting on your information sharing and seeking practice. In other words, do you go back and check and recheck and have those conversations and make sure that you have absolutely nailed what people are saying and you have that proper picture. And what will come through very strongly on both of these cases is the ability to listen and hear the views of family and friends who know the child well, and what barriers might be getting in the way of you doing this, either practical, professional, emotional, whatever. What might stop you sense checking those things and finding out a little bit more? What assumptions you might be holding relating to culture and ethnicity and gender and sexuality, and in what ways might this be affecting your practice and your curiosity? And what aspects of working with families whose engagement is reluctant and sporadic do you feel more or less confident with? And what would you consider to be typical signs of parental avoidance? And what's interesting in these two cases, and we will have all heard of the phrase has slipped out of my mind at the moment, disguised compliance, where families appear to be going along with the plan and doing what's said, but actually aren't. In these two particular cases, there was actual parental avoidance, and I think that's something that we need to be very mindful of. And finally, and a really important point is, what opportunities do you have to challenge decisions within your own and with other agencies, and to consider different professionals' perspectives? Now, this is tricky because this involves us all being very mature in terms of respectful challenge. There's challenge, isn't there, which is rude and hostile, and there's challenge which is genuinely professional and respectful. And that's the position we need to get in. We need to be regarding that challenge as a positive. And that's a big shift for some people. Others have been doing that for some time, but it is something that is really significant. We can all get really defensive when somebody challenges our decision or our position or our opinion, but actually we need to regard that as a real strength of how we work together as a partnership, both in the day-to-day work, but also in the strategic developments too. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So I have to say there was palpable public shock just before Christmas when these two cases came to light in very short order. They were very close to each other. And what we've got to do is to try and attempt to understand how and why the services and systems designed to protect them didn't actually do so. But I would remind us all, and this is a quote from the report, Arthur and Star were killed by the people who should have been caring for them and loving them. The perpetrators, and they alone, are responsible for what happened. And I think it's most important that we recognise that. It's easy for us all as professionals to blame ourselves. We all have a part to play, but actually the deaths of these children were directly at the hands of the people who were their carers. And the report also asserts that the child protection must be strengthened. And they're very keen to say that that doesn't mean that the system is broken. And it recognises that every day thousands and thousands of children are protected by conscientious, committed and capable workers, both police officers, health, education and many, many other professionals. The report also reminds us that there is a real risk, and we've seen this happen in the past, have we not, when there have been other similar national issues, that the whole system becomes risk averse as a result. And all that means is the system gets very overheated, everyone's referring things to each other and passing things around. And the report is very clear to say that this can obscure those children who most need help. Interesting, it says, increasing rates of child protection activity does not necessarily translate into effective child protection practice. So we need to hang on to our capacity to make good and sensible decisions and referrals, and not to kind of go into risk averse mode. But we do also, as a partnership, recognise that the public sector and the services that you deliver are massively stretched at the moment. We know we've got staffing issues right across the sector, in health, in police, in local authority, everywhere. And we also recognise that this means that staff are very under pressure in dealing with all of this. And certainly cases such as Star and Arthur add to the feeling of staff that they are under pressure, and it's very, very difficult. We all need to continue to support each other at these times. At the same time, as I've just been saying, respectful challenge. That is a difficult balance to undertake, and we recognise that. But all of us as partners are considering how we support our staff in these times and doing this really high profile, very difficult work. People need to be offered good quality supervision and guidance. We need good quality arrangements to support staff. We need to manage caseloads and workloads as effectively as we possibly can, but we do recognise that that is difficult in the current climate. And finally, I suppose it's just a reminder that we have a collective responsibility to make sense of this, of what's happened, and to learn and secure together improvements that should make, well, I won't say make sure this never happens again, because we know that's not the case, don't we? But to make sure that we protect children as much as we possibly can, which I know is the driver and the motivation for everyone, and certainly for everyone with us this afternoon. I heard an interesting thing on the telly the other day, which was saying interesting that the number of child deaths in this country has been relatively consistent for a number of years. So we do need to hang on to the fact that we do rescue and save an awful lot of children every single year. So in that context, I'm now going to hand over to Colleen, who is going to take us through Arthur's story.
Thanks, Sally. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the timeline of events that are set out within the National Review, and go through the sort of summary of key events that took place. I would really urge everyone who's on this call to make the time to read the full report, because whilst we can provide a summary and overview of the key points, it is the detail of the report which, you know, is going to make the most difference to us going forward. So, you know, please listen to this, and if you haven't already read the report, then please take the time to read this. If you can just move on to the next slide, Sarah. So just a little bit of a reminder who Arthur was. You know, Arthur was a little boy. He loved playing cricket. We know he was a Birmingham City fan, and he didn't live many miles away from where we are here today in Walsall. He enjoyed school, had lots of friends, and was always laughing. He was 6 years of age when he died on the 17th of June 2020. At that time, he was living with his father, Thomas, and father's partner, Emma, and her 2 children. Arthur is described by family members and his teachers as a happy, healthy young boy who always had a smile on his face. And I think that you know, we will all remember Arthur's smiling face, and that will be an image that will stay with us throughout our working careers. So in terms of the timeline, the timeline clearly sets out some of the key events. So when Arthur was born, when his parents separated, and some key incidents that occurred prior to Arthur moving to live with his father. So the first incident was when Arthur was living with his mother in Birmingham, and there was an incident of domestic abuse that occurred in June 2018, actually when Arthur was not present, which prompted a child in need assessment that concluded that there was no need for any further action. Into the following year, in February 2019, Arthur's mother was arrested for domestic murder of her then partner. And that is the point then when Arthur moves into the full-time care of his father. A further assessment was undertaken, and that assessment concluded with no further action. And Arthur's father, Thomas, was felt to be a protective factor for him. In October 2019, contact with the maternal family stopped, and that sort of ceasing of contact sort of coincided, is believed to have coincided with Thomas beginning his relationship with Emma. In the December 2019, mother attempts to re-establish contact, and CAFCAS became involved as part of that process. There was also some growing concern around Arthur's mental health, and he was referred into mental health services and received appropriate assessments, and he was assessed by those mental health services and CAFCAS. So prior to Arthur moving to live with his father, Arthur would see regularly both of his parents, and he had regular contact with both sides of his extended family. CAFCAS did become involved because at that time there was a dispute about contact, and they were involved in assessing the circumstances surrounding contact within the family. Thomas and Emma began a relationship in October 2019, and in March 2020, Arthur and Thomas moved in with Emma and her 2 children. This was at the start of the first national lockdown, and I think was at a point where people had to make decisions around where they were living because you couldn't move between 2 households. Emma and her children were known to Solihull Children's Services and other agencies in Solihull. Emma had a history of mental health issues, and there was a history of domestic abuse, both with her as a victim and a perpetrator. It is not clear to what extent Thomas or his extended family knew about this history. We could just move on to the next slide, please, Sarah. Okay, so there was a critical moment in April 2020, when after Thomas and Arthur left Emma's home and went to stay with Arthur's paternal grandparents, and this was following a dispute between Thomas and Emma. At this point, the extended family alerted professionals to what they observed as bruising to Arthur's back. On the 16th of April, the couple reconciled, and Thomas and Arthur went back to live with Emma and her 2 children. This was the last time that his paternal grandparents were to see him alive. You'll see from the chronology, from the timeline, that grandparents continue to raise concerns around the bruising, and they raised those concerns with both the police and children's social care. There were various visits. There was police well checks. There was a social work visit as well. And as those visits were taking place, the family also sent through photographs of the bruising to the police. This was never shared directly with children's social care from the police, but the family did shortly afterwards also share the information with children's social care as well. So there was lots of opportunities really in terms of grandparents and both maternal and paternal grandparents contacting the police, social care and education professionals, raising their concerns as to the safety of their grandson Arthur. They felt that he was at risk of abuse from Emma and that Thomas was not in a position to protect him. As restrictions started to lift, Arthur was expected to return to school on the 8th of June 2020. He did not attend, with his father citing that he was not well and would return the following week. On the 16th of June, emergency services were called to Emma's address in response to a report of Arthur being in cardiac arrest. Arthur had sustained a substantial head injury, and unfortunately he was not able to survive that injury, and he died in the early hours of the 17th of June. The presentation of Arthur gave cause for concern, as he was described as looking unkempt with bruising on his body. As you all will know, his father's partner, Emma Tustin, was convicted on the 1st of December 2021 of his murder, and Arthur's father, Thomas Hughes, was convicted of manslaughter. They are now both serving prison terms. So I'm going to hand over to Maria now, who's going to talk to you about STAR.
Okay, so Star was born in May 2019 and died in September 2020. She was described by people that knew and loved her as an inquisitive toddler who loved music, danced in her baby walker, and was regularly seen laughing and singing. Oh, sorry, you have moved on to the next slide. That's wonderful. So in May 2019, Star was born, but it's fair to say that in the antenatal period, there were opportunities to perhaps get to know Star's mother better. And various things played into a situation that meant that that really didn't happen. So there was a failure really to recognise the vulnerability of the family and respond to it. And in part, that wasn't helped by the fact that there was no teenage pregnancy pathway where the family were living. So there was no post-16 support, even though there would be an acknowledgement that teenage parents frequently are disadvantaged and require additional support really to bring up their children. There was no categorisation of her pregnancy as anything other than low risk. Star's mother was reluctant to share information about Star's father in that antenatal period. And he was a care leaver, and agencies were involved with him and had quite a lot of information about him. In fact, there were 2 referrals to social workers during that antenatal period from services supporting father who were concerned about how he would adapt to his role as father and the situation that him and Frankie were living in. The panel who completed the review felt that the pre-birth assessment criteria would have been met. And the context at that time was of the front door managing really high volumes of referrals. It's also fair to state that in this antenatal period, the statutory requirement for health visiting assessment was not met. And again, the context given was that this was just human error in an overwhelmed service at the time. Following Star's birth, it was quite unremarkable. She did experience some weight loss and required admission to a paediatric ward and was diagnosed with reflux. She was subsequently discharged to the maternal extended family, and there seems little evidence at that point that any of the professionals involved identified them as a family that would need any additional help. The relationship between Frankie and Star's father was causing problems within the wider family, and between June and July 2019 there were 3 domestic abuse incidents reported due to these increasing tensions within the family. There was no completion of DASH and no exploration of other children in the household, and none of these episodes resulted in a referral for Star. In October 2019, Star's father presented to the emergency department after his relationship had ended with Frankie. The staff there did complete a safeguarding referral on Star due to concerns regarding his presentation. In January 2020, there is the initial safeguarding referral citing Savannah's abuse of Star. This referral is made as a result of one of Frankie's friends' disclosures to her own domestic abuse support worker. These allegations included Frankie as a victim of domestic abuse and Star as a child who was experiencing slapping from Savannah. The referral also cited the fact that her friend felt she was increasingly called upon to care for Star. And this referral did result in an assessment between January and March 2020. This included a telephone call to Frankie, who denied the domestic abuse, a police safe and well check. A newly qualified social worker was completing the assessment, and there were 3 visits. There were other children in the household, and all children bar 1 were seen. Checks were completed with health visiting and school. Savannah's surname was not interrogated, so people didn't note that. And there were no checks on Savannah, in spite of the fact that the allegation was about her. Much of the assessment got taken up with housing and trying to solve housing issues. And in February 2020, it seems that Savannah ended her relationship with Frankie, and at that point, Frankie gave Star to her maternal grandmother, as she could not cope. But the social worker completing the assessment at that time wasn't made aware of that information. So that the panel found there was good recognition of DA as a factor of concern for this family, and the referral was classified as level 4, which should have led to a strategy discussion and an opportunity to include plans about how the approach would be made to the family. But the strategy meeting didn't happen. The panel also found consideration should have been given to Section 47 due to the allegation of a slap, but again, this didn't happen. The maternal grandmother was deemed protective, and that seems to have reassured staff greatly. The fact that Savannah didn't feature in checks was criticised really by the panel, and they said that it was a superficial and mechanistic approach to the assessment, and the limitations in the quality of this assessment and the decisions that were taken on the basis of it significantly affected the way that child protection concerns about Star and her family were viewed into the future. Another factor that is identified by the panel at this point is that the supervision of the social worker was split between the team manager and the practice manager, and there was confusion in relation to the practice decisions, and neither one of these supervisors actually saw the assessment. It was unclear really who was supervising around the quality of the assessment. In May 2020, a second referral was made in relation to Savannah's care of Star and domestic abuse of Frankie. This time the referral was made by maternal grandmother. It included allegations that a dummy was destroyed by S in front of Star, that she'd been forced to eat garlic, and that Savannah was slam choking her. This referral resulted in an unannounced visit and phone checks with family members, but was deemed to be malicious. So Star and Savannah gave an account that maternal grandmother was reported not to like their parenting style, as they were seeking to establish a routine with Star, and that she disapproved of same-sex relationships, and that was her motivation really for the malicious referral. At that point, there were no concerns being reported by health visitors, and Frankie continued to deny the DA. The panel found that the response to the referral was not deemed to be in line with the seriousness of the allegations. They were critical of the fact the maternal grandmother was not spoken to as the referrer. There was no evidence of strategy, discussion or consideration of this, and there was a seeming acceptance of Frankie's perspective with limited evidence of critical thinking around that. There was a decision made to close the case documented on the 9th once the police checks on Savannah were returned, and the police checks came back on the 11th, which were positive around a previous restraining order and previous DA, which again, so they were discussed with both Frankie and Savannah. At that point, Frankie denied the DA again, and Savannah disputed some of the police information. The case was closed. Father was told about the social work decision, and he maintained that he was really very worried about Star at that point, and that she was a victim of abuse. The panel were concerned about the fact that they felt that insufficient weight was given to his view at that point, and that the overall approach in terms of the assessment was not forensic enough, not challenging enough, that there was an over-reliance on self-report, and that there was obviously clear and misleading and manipulation of professionals, which managed to very successfully distract away from Star and what day-to-day life was like for her. In June 2020, on the 21st of June, Star's father reported that he'd received a photo of Star with bruising to her face. Maternal grandmother was visited by the police and confirmed that she'd witnessed Savannah punching Frankie and that Frankie was too strict with Star. And she also shared that both Star and Frankie had moved in with Savannah at this stage. A family member shared pictures with the police and also described how Star was being neglected at that point, and they gave examples such as having left in the cot all day, in dirty nappies, and being sworn at by Frankie. Frankie's siblings at this point were reporting that they had seen her slap Star on the face. Frankie provided two differing stories about how the bruising occurred. Latterly, so the final explanation she gave was that she'd hit her face on the coffee table. There was no multi-agency strategy meeting prior to the child protection medical. There were some difficulties in organising that child protection medical on the same day, and in the end it was not carried out locally. The clinician who completed the child protection medical was a registrar, not a consultant, although had been adequately trained. And the child protection medical did not confirm that the injuries seen were abusive. It concluded that bruising was likely to be accidental. There was evidence that the registrar did discuss that opinion with the consultant. The panel felt that the child protection medical findings were not deemed unreasonable in this instance. The bruising was over bony prominences and fitted with the explanation offered. But they did make the point that the outcome of child protection medical should contribute to, but never be the only consideration when making child protection decisions, and the need to really see the findings from that child protection medical alongside other information about the family, including known risks, previous concerns, and the risk of, physical abuse and harm to Star, and how important it is really to retain uncertainty if we don't have clear facts telling us one thing or another. Further family concerns were explored by social workers, and interestingly, at this point, the family spoke about the fear that they had about speaking out due to Savannah's intimidation, but there was a very real sense of fear for Star's safety. There was a further visit conducted by the social workers, but it was virtual, and the panel were questioning about the use of a virtual visit and how appropriate or proportionate that was due to the level of concern. And there was also some criticism really about agencies dismissing the family concerns and the context of the previous allegations, in the context of the previous allegations, and the over-reliance, as I said before, on self-report from Savannah and Frankie. The panel really felt that it's important for all of us to hold in mind that there could be family tensions and a risk to Star at the same time. And they also said that at the point that the case was closed, the signs of safety score was 8, but there was so people felt there was still some risk to Star, but there was really no clear evidence about how the unknowns at that point were going to be explored, or how the existing risk was going to be mitigated, and that overall agencies were too fast to accept the explanation offered by Frankie and Savannah about the same-sex relationship as a driver for malicious referrals. And then if we could move to the next slide. On the 27th of August, we know that a video with Star with bruises is circulating amongst her wider family members. And on the 31st of August, Star's father reports the video to the police. They try to visit, but they're told that the family are in Scotland. On the 2nd of September, the maternal grandfather reports the video to the front door. He's asked to email it, but he can't. He describes other concerns to social care at that point, including domestic abuse and the general sort of care, neglectful care of Star. The social worker contacts Frankie, who says that she has reported to her previous social worker that Star had sustained those bruises through a fall down the stairs, but there was no record of that contact. They try to arrange a home visit. It's deferred to the 4th of September as the family report they're going to Scotland. And sort of around about this time, there is also some dialogue from Frankie with the GP. So on the 1st of September, the GP had been contacted about a mouth injury to Star and advised that 111 was contacted. And when the GP realised that this hadn't happened, he got back in touch with Frankie on the 3rd, inviting them to another appointment. And this was cancelled by Frankie, reporting that Star's lip was now healing. Further advice was given to attend an emergency appointment when Frankie had made inquiries about blisters on Star's tongue, and again this advice was not taken. On the 4th of September, a home visit was undertaken by a social worker who noted that the home was clean, warm and tidy, and that there was good attachment between Frankie and Star. The case notes recorded a faint bruise to Star's cheek, a previous bruise to the ear and bruise to the right shin, which is noted to be consistent with marks and bruises. There's a full breakdown. Sorry, I think people that are familiar with bruising patterns would always question whether a bruising to the ear would be consistent with normal marks and bruises. This referral did not result in the required strategy meeting. There was no opportunity to share information, identify gaps or plan a joint course of action for all agencies, and there was no child protection medical at that point. There was no opportunity to bring together the GP information and the police information. The video was not actively sought or received. There was avoidant behaviour from the family, very evident at that point, which was not challenged. It was taken at face value. And the panel felt that the decision to close lacked critical thinking, given the history and the level of concerns. The home visit had been carried out by an agency social worker, and it was later closed by a team managing following review of the notes. And again, the review talks about the context of this decision and the fact that at that point there was real pressure to allocate cases following an agency worker leaving, and the impact on working pressures on the ability to think critically, clearly and reflectively, and to challenge effectively. How caught up we all are really when we're stretched. So Star sadly died in Bradford, aged 16 months, on the 22nd of September. The final cause of death was abdominal hemorrhage caused by blunt force trauma. A post-mortem found evidence of a recent skull fracture approximately 10 days before her death, and a refracturing of her right tibia approximately 3 to 7 days before. There were multiple injuries to her scalp, forehead, cheek and back, and there was stark evidence that Star had been physically assaulted on numerous occasions in the weeks and months leading up to her death. Her mother's partner, Savannah Brockhill, was subsequently convicted of the murder on 15th of December 21, and Frankie was convicted of causing or allowing the death, and both are now in prison. I'm going to hand over now to Colleen, who's going to take us through some of the local learning.
Okay, thank you, Maria. I'm just going to just take a minute. I mean, it's a lot of information there, and I can see that Dawn has put in the chat, not picking you out, Dawn, but you've probably just, you know, sort of just set out what we're all feeling. And I think it's just to take a moment, you know, it's really difficult to hear these stories, these accounts. And I think we just need to, you know, remind ourselves these are two very extreme sets of circumstances. There were particular sets of circumstances. And, you know, it seems very straightforward when we read out timelines and we read out, you know, accounts of as what has probably taken weeks and months for a whole group of professionals from different backgrounds to pull together and to analyse. So it feels a little bit like all of this is straightforward. People should have seen these things. It's obvious, when actually we're very much looking at this through the lens of hindsight, and also with the benefit of extensive consideration to the circumstances around these two very young and highly vulnerable children. So just to take a moment really, and to just sort of gather our thoughts. What we're going to move on to now is an opportunity really to reflect on what this means for us locally, and this isn't just about us in Walsall. This is around everybody working nationally who are dealing with these very difficult and complex sets of circumstances, and how really we can learn from the reports that have been undertaken in relation to both Star and Arthur. I'm going first from a local authority perspective, but because I'm going first, it means that I'm incorporating learning that relates to all of us. Doesn't matter what partner agency you are from, and rather than everybody, Lucy and Maria repeating the same learning because it's relevant to health and police, I'm just going to talk about it. And just because I'm talking about it from a local authority perspective, you need to think about it from a partnership perspective as well, so that we just don't have that repetition. So, clearly a lot of learning for us taking forward, and really, really important that we're not complacent, that nothing like this can happen in Walsall. This could happen anywhere. These are very, very difficult sets of circumstances to have to respond to. So I've broken down the learning into different parts. So the first one is around practice and practice knowledge. And I think that, really the first one, which is around the child's lived experience. And I think that one of the key considerations for me from this review, and from, other reviews that have taken place as well, is how we work together to really understand what the daily life is like for a child where there are concerns around their welfare. And I think sometimes, particularly in these complex situations like the ones that we've heard this afternoon, sometimes we can get caught up with who said what did they say, is that true, is that malicious, is there any evidence for this? And really the ins and outs and all of that, whilst important in understanding the circumstances and in assessing levels of need and risk, actually within all of that is a child, and whatever the sort of rights and wrongs are within there, or within that situation, it's really, really important that we stop and take stock of what is going on for that individual child, and what do we know about their lived experience, and how we pull all of the information together, which includes observations of the child's views, what all of the different people are saying, whether that's family members, extended family members, but also the views of professionals as well, and how we pull all of that together and triangulate that information so that we understand the child's lived experience, because that's the important thing. And yes, the ins and outs of things are important, and understanding, what may or may not have happened is important. Within all of that, the child is receiving a level of care, is being exposed to different adults, and we need to understand what all of that means for the child from the child's perspective. So I think for me, that is one of the key learning that we need to think about, certainly within children's social care, but I also think across the partnership when we're dealing with some of these complex situations. Critical thinking, Maria's alluded to this within her summary relating to STAR. There appears to be a lack of robust critical thinking, triangulating of information, and triggering of statutory processes at key moments. And certainly one of the things for us within children's social care and across the partnership to think about is, how do we ensure that we all remain professionally curious and ensure that we have all of the relevant information available to us before we make critical decisions. So, when we know there may be some information that's available that we haven't yet got to, make the time to ascertain that information and not reach conclusions and decisions until we are confident that we have a full understanding of the whole situation. And I think that's, you know, again, based on the two cases, that is something that is going to be really important to us going forward in the way that we work within children's social care and in children's services, but also across the partnership as well. I think within Arthur's situation, very early on, because of the circumstances of Arthur's mother, father was seen as a protective factor early on. And I think we really need to think about the ways in which we identify parents as protective factors. And I know I've been part of this myself, where we, you know, quickly identify a parent as a protective factor. And once they're deemed as a protective factor, very often that view stays with them and it becomes the narrative about that parent. And actually, sometimes, you know, we don't go into the detail of that parent because they've already been labelled as a protective factor. And certainly within this case, you know, what I don't know is whether or not, you know, the involvement with the father, there was one child in need assessment, whether or not there was a real interrogation of the information with a clear analysis of what was father's position and father's ability to meet Arthur's needs and to safeguard him in the future before he was labelled as that protective factor. So whilst he may have been the more appropriate parent to care for Arthur at that time, were we really in a position to say that he was a protective factor? The role of extended families, you know, and that is probably one of the saddest things within these two situations, is that both of these children were so loved within their extended families and they had such good relationships within their extended families. And it's hard to believe really that two children found themselves in this situation when they had such a close-knit, committed, passionate extended family who were doing all that they could to safeguard them and to raise their concerns with professionals. And I think that, you know, we've really got to think about the way in which we listen to the views of extended families, particularly where relationships are strained, because very often we can fall into a camp of, is it true or is it malicious? And it can be both or neither of those things. You know, there can be real concern around a child, even when we know that relationships are not the best that they could be. It just because relationships are not good doesn't mean that things have to be malicious. So I think we really need to think about the way in which we involve the extended family. And I think there are many opportunities for us to strengthen our work in terms of the way in which we work with extended families, both in terms of supporting children and families and looking at the way in which we use family meetings and family group conferences to engage the extended families, because very often, you know, we want the extended families to work alongside us, because actually if the family can work effectively together, then that should ensure that the child is safe and reduces the reliance on children's social care. But equally, if the extended family are raising concerns, then we need to listen to them and we really need to interrogate the information that they are giving to us, particularly when, as in these two cases, the extended families had played such an important role in the lives of both Arthur and Star. The need for chronologies, this is an issue that's come out of very many historical serious case reviews and child CSPRs, where, you know, we really need to think about the use of chronologies so that we can really understand key issues and issues relating to background history that may have bearings on what we're dealing with today. So in relation to Arthur, the history in relation to Emma was not given enough consideration during the time that the family had reported bruises. There wasn't sufficient information sharing and there wasn't sufficient professional curiosity, which may have been triggered if we'd have pulled all of the information together within a chronology. So again, you know, this is a very basic thing. It's things that we've talked extensively about within the partnership when we've looked at previous serious case reviews, the real importance of taking the time to complete a chronology. Domestic abuse, we know that domestic abuse is one of our key priorities within Walsall. It's a very, very big area of need. And you know, the incidence of domestic abuse in these situations was very key. But one of the things that we need to reflect on is how we see women as as potential abusers. As you know, very, very unusually, both Arthur and Star were killed by women. You know, so when we're assessing situations where there's domestic abuse, how do we articulate the risks that may be presented by the female, and how do we analyse that risk and understand the implications that actually, as women, they can also kill children. It isn't always men, and that we have to assess risk. Doesn't matter who the perpetrator is, we have to assess risk and look at what the risks are for that child, and how we put in sufficient safeguards so that we are, you know, absolutely clear that women can present as much risk as men within these situations, and how we challenge ourselves within that. How, as professional agencies, we use supervision, we use reflective discussion to actually challenge some of our thinking about women and the assumptions that we have based on our experiences. So really opening up our minds, really, and our thinking when we're assessing and when we're analysing risk and when we're making plans that ensures that you know, we're considering fully the whole situation and are not you know, using gender stereotypes to inform our thinking. And I think as a wider issue for us all across the whole partnership, there needs to be a whole system response to domestic abuse and around how we manage risk and provide support. So moving on to systems and processes, I think that there was definitely within both Arthur and Star's situations an over-reliance on the assumption of involvement of other agencies. I think it's clear that there was an assumption that because agencies were involved, that something was being picked up, and there wasn't necessarily a need to share that information. So because the police were involved, because children's social care were involved, they would know about these things and they would be dealing and responding to these things. And actual fact, you know, both situations play out that was not the case. So I think that we have to remove the reliance on assumption within our day-to-day practice, and not just assume that because a particular agency is involved that they know about something, they understand the context of something, or that they are giving the right weight to that particular piece of information. So we have to think about the way in which we communicate and share information. Weakness of information sharing ties into that issue, and again that has been a significant point of learning, I think, in every serious case review and more recent CSPRs that we've ever considered, both nationally and locally, you know, and these two situations absolutely echo those previous historical learnings. Strategy meetings. In both of these situations, strategy meetings were not purposeful or represented by all agencies. And actually, there was, you know, a lot of questions around what these meetings told us in relation to these situations, how robust they were, and, you know, how did they support in safeguarding Arthur and Star and ensuring that agencies were clear around their roles and responsibilities. And I definitely think that this is an issue for us here locally. We are the lead agency for strategy meetings within children's social care, but I think that this is definitely a key area for us in terms of how we can strengthen practice to ensure that strategy meetings are sufficiently robust, they are attended by the right people, that we have the opportunity for information sharing, for reflection, for analysis, and that we use those meetings to drive forwards planning for children, and in terms of ensuring that we are interrogating all of the information and assessing risk before we are reaching conclusions around outcome. And then within all of that is the place for ensuring, you know, that there is space for critical thinking and that respectful challenge that Sally spoke about at the start of the session between agencies, because we don't always get it right, we don't always agree, and that's absolutely part of the work that we deal with day in, day out. And I think that what we have to do is take the opportunity to reflect. We have to take the opportunity to challenge if we're unhappy in the moment when something is happening. Pick up the phone, instigate the safeguarding escalation process, but we need to be getting into the practice of challenging in the moment so that we can make a difference for that child. If that doesn't happen, but at the end of an intervention we feel that there's a more that we could have done or learning for us, then we need to create the space for that reflective and critical thinking so that we can learn and move forward together in terms of the way in which we respond to individual situations. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Just conscious of time, sorry. So I'll just whittle through these. So leadership and culture, certainly partnership arrangements, and together, Sally has set out some of the priorities of the Safeguarding Partnership, and, we need to use the learning from these two cases to ensure that we have good and clear partnership arrangements in place across the Safeguarding Partnership. And, that again is something that has started and is taking forward. We need to develop that culture of learning and shared responsibilities where we work together effectively. We want to learn. As I've said, we don't always get it right. None of us within our agencies can ever say and hold our hands up to say that we ever get it right all of the time. And we need to learn, and that's why things like the quality work that we do as a Safeguarding Partnership, where we deep dive into cases where we have a concern, we report them into the Safeguarding Partnership if we feel there's learning on a particular case. We really want to promote that culture of learning where we reflect and consider together how we can work more effectively together. And I think that we need to think about how we are clear around our vision, the responsibilities and the governance arrangements that support us within our day-to-day work, so that we are absolutely clear on the governance and the structures that we have in place which support us in undertaking this very difficult role. So in terms of the wider service context, I think one of the key things for certainly children's services, and I know this is an issue across the whole partnership, is around workforce development and recruitment and retention. We know that capacity, agency workers was an issue in STAR, and we know that locally and nationally, we are under a lot of pressure, and we need to think about how we can develop a robust workforce that has the right skills, experience to be able to deal with some of these difficult situations, and that we are providing the right support through supervision, where there's the opportunity for reflection as well as management oversight and direction, and also that we take the time to support staff in dealing with some of these difficult situations. So within children's social care, we've just introduced a new pilot where we are offering clinical supervision to our staff, recognising the impact of trauma from dealing with these types of situations day in, day out, which does take its toll on individual workers. So the way in which we create the right environment in which to support staff is really important, and the way in which we retain staff is also very important. Some wider issues for us to think about, I think, are in relation to mental health support and the way in which we can access services to children and families at the earliest opportunity within the local community before things get critical, so that we're able to meet need at the earliest opportunities. And I think that one of the key concerns, particularly coming out of STAR, is the capacity of health visitors and early years professionals in identifying concerns for preschool aged children who have we seen from STAR, and even for Arthur, because Arthur, although with school age, was out of school because of the pandemic, how vulnerable children can be when they're not in school every day. Okay, so that's just some key reflections from me. I'm going to hand over to Maria now.
I thank you, Colleen, and obviously a lot of what Colleen's spoken about has got a much wider application than children's services. They are partnership issues as well, but I'm going to try and focus in on some of the key learning now for health in particular. So starting off and really picking up on Colin's last point about health visiting, you know, we need to be mindful that we've got some oversight of the compliance with and the impact of that pre-birth assessment completed by health visitors, which is a requirement really. Are we assured that that is working for us in Walsall? Do we know that that is really helping identify families who would benefit from high quality family support and helping to engage them in it? How effective as well is our teenage pregnancy pathway? And again, are we helping to identify vulnerability, build relationships that will help young parents meet the challenges of being able to care for their children? A thing that comes up in reviews continuously is the pregnant women not wanting to provide details of their partners. And I think we have to see this in the context of services that often don't allow for continuity or building up trust. So again, you know, that focus on maternity services, health visiting services, etc. I think we need to be thinking a lot about child protection medicals. And again, are we assured that we're having child protection medicals when they're indicated? So that there were occasions when child protection medicals should have happened in both of these cases and they didn't. I think there's also issues for us around how we prepare staff to undertake those medicals and to word them appropriately and present them within the context of a wider child protection investigation. So I think there is an art to that almost, and that we could help our practitioners with that a lot more. There's obviously a great deal to reflect upon around Arthur's case in terms of mental health and think family referrals and mental health for adults in a family, and how we identify wider concerns for family members, but also mental health for our young people. And we know that this is an area that is very challenged currently. So are we cited in Walsall on what our current level of need is in terms of mental health, what our waiting lists are looking like, what the mitigation is like when somebody is on a waiting list, how we're mitigating that risk? And, you know, how assured are we people are getting access or will get access in the future to the appropriate level of support? There is something around our collective approach, I suppose, as well as a health approach when a child has a parent that goes to prison, and how we really make sure that they're well supported. If we move on to the next slide. I think this reflects a lot of what Colin's talked about already, but how we support practitioners with critical thinking, reflection and challenge. You know, what access are we really giving our health staff to restorative supervision, time out, time to think and reflect on cases in a meaningful way? It's clearly critical for particular staff, so I think really homing in on the staff that we might need to help a little bit more, and thinking about staff in MASH, staff in an acute paediatric setting. I think that's an area that we do really need to focus on. Ensuring processes are right in MASH from a health perspective. So we're undertaking a review at the moment that is looking specifically at the resource and also some of the information sharing processes. We know that we're going to have the single health and social care record very soon, which should enable much more ease of access to information to help ensure that the spread of information across multiple health systems is available to staff in MASH. And we're looking forward to that, and we're excited about that, because anything we can do to make some of this information sharing easier for staff at the front line is obviously very important. I think all of our staff need help with managing avoidant behaviours and the distraction and manipulation that we've seen at play in both of these cases, and help to really retain that focus on the child. we need a line of sight at the partnership in terms of the effectiveness of MASH, but in terms of health, we need a line of oversight about our MASH data. So we are working to have a single specification for MASH across the Black Country with a single set of KPIs that will hopefully tell us, so we can do some comparison work and we can look critically at whether or not our resource is right and how effectively we're contributing to those MASH arrangements. And again, I think Colleen picked up on this or mentioned this as well, but how we really help staff to listen to what families are telling us, to lend sufficient weight to the concerns that they express and make sure they're involved. And obviously the family safeguarding model operating in Walsall is a really helpful tool to help us to do that. And I'm going to hand over now to Lucy, who's going to tell us about learning from the police.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks, Colleen. And of course, what they've both talked around is lots of multi-agency learning that does incorporate police. And we're in quite a unique position in West Midlands Police in as much as that we obviously are a force-wide service. And so I wanted to give the group today some assurances that West Midlands Police have taken this report extremely seriously, and an executive group has met this week to talk about the West Midlands Police's response to this report and to the recommendations that have been given. And in due course, we'll have a very specific response. But before that comes, I can talk from my perspective around that localised learning that we need to take on board from this report. And certainly, firstly, we need to look at the continuous improvement and training of all our frontline staff and officers to recognise signs of abuse, early signs of abuse, ensure that the voice of the child is always recorded and looked for. And so also that our frontline staff are understanding localised safeguarding procedures in conjunction with our partners in Walsall. We have a very new and young workforce that are on our front line, and we must ensure that they understand the MASH process and the partners that work in that area of business, and ensure that they have some opportunity for learning, reflective practice, critical thinking in their day jobs, because they are the people that are reacting to these cases in the first instance. So we must ensure that we're putting that development and time and energy into those frontline staff. Our police systems are tricky, and we have a very new police system called Connect, and we in West Midlands Police are doing lots of work around ensuring that the information held within that police system is accurate, is joined up, and is accessible at all times, because we understand from this review that a lot of information sharing was a problem. So we need to make sure that our systems support that bigger system to support our partners. The training requirements of our specialist services within our MASH capacity, we need to make sure that officers and staff that work in our multi-agency safeguarding hubs is at an appropriate level, to make sure that they have the right people in attendance making those critical decisions around child protection. So making sure they're skilled and equipped to perform that role in conjunction with partners. And also that we contribute, West Midlands Police contribute to any inspections, and in particular any JTIs, Joint Targeted Area Inspections. So at the moment we're working through a task and finish group with Walsall partners, looking at preparation for a potential JTI in Walsall, and this is really important work because it means that we're not working in isolation as a service. We're working jointly to see how collectively we can improve and respond appropriately to any inspection that would come our way. And finally, talking around the continuous improvement and development of our domestic abuse investigations and the safeguarding that takes place currently, and how that fits within a multi-agency disciplinary, and how we can look at this current practice, improve and strengthen it. So that's quite generic, and I do apologise in advance for that, but I'm expecting some far more specific learning to come from that, and I will share that through the partnership when I do have that. So now that I've gone through our learning, I'm going to move into the recommendations that have come out of the national report. So thank you. So there were 8 recommendations that came from this report. I would encourage everybody, if you haven't, to look through this report in detail, because there is lots of information involved in each recommendation, lots of relevant information for lots of partners on the call today. So firstly, recommendation 1 is that a new expert-led multi-agency model for child protection, investigation, planning, intervention and review. So what we know, that currently there were problems with information sharing across agencies, and there was insufficient challenge between professionals. That's what came out of this review. So by creating a multi-agency child protection unit, we should be able to improve the quality of decision making and understand risk better. These would be multi-agency co-located teams led by an expert social worker. And there is a proposal that the people that sit within these teams are experts in child protection. So we know we have MASHs at the moment, but this is talking about developing this multi-agency approach further. It talks about having a direct link between family help teams and the multi-agency child protection unit. And by developing these units, there's an opportunity to level up the quality and consistency of the MASH models across the country. So recommendation 2 was to establish a national multi-agency practice standard for child protection. So it's recognised that there's very little in a way of a national set of standards or expectations in how we intervene in private family life through our child protection measures. So we will develop a set of national standards which capture the best available evidence of what works well when working with children and families. So there's a common purpose framework, and this provides consistency across England. And in terms of this common purpose framework, the public will have access to this. So there's an opportunity to challenge professionals when we're not doing what we should be. So recommendation 3 is to strengthen the local safeguarding partners to ensure proper coordination and involvement of all agencies. So each area establish a multi-agency operation subgroup of the safeguarding partners to direct that operational business. And these should be chaired by any 3 of the statutory partners, health, police and local authority. So it requires leaders from the key agencies to jointly lead that system. It ensures proper oversight and involvement by all agencies. This report has highlighted that there can be a lack of clarity around strategic and operational functions and governance. So it talks about the role of education also, how education is often kept out of the loop of this type of governance. And there's a consideration to including the education as a key safeguarding partner, which it isn't at the moment. And finally, bespoke leadership development programme for our safeguarding partners within that group to ensure that there's some clear, joint and equal responsibility. Recommendation 4 is that changes to the multi-agency inspections to be better understood better understand local performance and drive improvement. So as you all probably know, we currently have single agency inspections, so Ofsted for Children's Social Care, Care Quality Commission for Health and HMIC for Police, but these do not give a full picture. We only have a limited number of JTI, Joint Targeted Area Inspections per year, and the report felt that this was not sufficient. So therefore, the recommendation is that there's an initial thematic review of our multi-agency arrangements in a number of areas, looking at the whole child protection journey, not just at the front door. And this will ensure that national understanding of the current baseline effectiveness of multi-agency arrangements can be understood. Recommendation 5 is a new role for the Child Safeguarding Practice Review Panel in driving practice improvement in safeguarding partners. So this recommendation aims to develop national peer support capability for safeguarding partners, which will be overseen by this panel. So this ensures that there's greater sharing of learning and insight and an opportunity to identify good practice. Recommendation 6 is a sharper performance focus and better coordination of child protection policy in central government. So establishing a National Child Protection Board, the recommendation is that we will bring together central government, central departments and local government, police, education and health reps in order to have three main functions. One, to oversee the performance in the child protection system. Two, to develop the set of national standards that I talked about before. And three, to ensure the clear delivery of those multi-agency child protection units that we talked about right at the beginning in recommendation 1. Recommendation 7 is using the potential of data to help professionals protect children. So simply put, this is the upgrade of our digital landscape with better use of data and technological solutions in our child protection field. And finally, recommendation 8, specific practice improvements in relation to domestic abuse. So the report recommends and identifies that improvements must be made in developing the specialist skills and expertise of staff when dealing with domestic abuse incidents, but particularly within a multi-agency disciplinary and arrangement setting. So we need to build stronger relationships. We need to look at commissioning DA services to ensure that we work better, as we do in child protection, to incorporate domestic abuse within that function. So that was a whistle-stop tour. I would encourage everybody to go through and read those recommendations in real detail, because there's so much more information that's contained there. But that's just where I got to at that point. So I hope that's sufficient for everybody.
Thank you very much, Lucy. I think there's been a lot of information in those three presentations, both things that we need to think about and understand locally, but some very, very big recommendations that have come nationally. And these recommendations also tie in with those from the care review, the Josh McAllister piece of work, which is also recommending some very substantial changes to the child protection and the child care system as a whole. So there is a big piece of work for us all to be doing as we take forward some of that, but I'll come on to that in a few moments. So I think it's important that we just sense check what we've done so far in the partnership in recent times. If I could have the next slide, please. We have, over the last 12 months, started to increase the amount and quantity and analysis of the data that the partnership looks at in terms of what's actually happening for children and how we understand how our system is working. And that goes right the way through from the performance and quality groups that you saw on the diagram, right up through to the executive, through the ops board, so that we're trying very hard to give partners a very thorough and honest understanding of what the position is. And that's certainly one of the issues that arose in the Solihull JTI as a consequence of the Arthur case, was the lack of understanding of the partners of what was genuinely happening at the front door. So we're trying very hard to make sure that we have more and clearer and better understood information. We've reviewed and updated our multi-agency information sharing protocol, which is the basic framework for how we all share information. But what's come out obviously in the previous presentations is that how we use that needs to be considered. There are some practical issues about how we do that and how we can take that forward more effectively. One of the big things that we've been doing in Walsall in the last 12 months and before that is a lot of audit work, and this has probably involved quite a number of you listening today. So audit work involves the partnership deciding what it is that we want to look at, what we're worried about, what we think we need to know a bit more about, and then understanding what's happening in a certain number of cases. Some of the audit work is done on a single agency basis, some of it is now done on a shared agency basis, and we get a lot of learning out of those. It tells us what happens across the system. And the learning from that goes into our practice development group and informs the training that we deliver and the policies that we pull together, and how we try to support you all in delivering good quality services. So those of you who are involved in audits or are likely to be involved in audits, they are done on the basis of trying to find out if things are working, and if not, what else we need to do to put it right. We've got an extensive programme of learning and development. We put out the 7-minute briefings. We put out anything that we think is of value, opportunities for people to learn and develop. We urge you to look at that and to be part of that, because that will help in moving some of this forward on. And we use the Safeguarding Partnership website a lot for lots of learning, lots of development, lots of links to this, that and the other. Please feel free to use that, because that is quite an extensive offer to everybody. In terms of the lived experience and understanding the lives of children, we do already have some arrangements for that, and a lot of work has been done on it, but the partnership is now looking for what's called a communication and engagement officer. And part of that person's role is to enhance that side of our understanding, to meet with and work out ways and means that we can hear the voice of children more extensively than we have so far, in order that that can affect and inform what we do and how we do it. We're out for that recruitment at the moment. It would be a fascinating and interesting job. People need to be aware that we're looking for that kind of person. You will see from these reports the kind of things that we're going to have to look at and try and find out what's genuinely going on and what is the lived experience for some of these children. And we need some clever ways and means of doing that. And to that end, we are employing, or will employ, a communication engagement officer to help us with that piece of work. We have improved our relationships with other key partnerships. I mentioned that earlier on in the original diagram with the circle with all the others that we work with. That is much, much better in the last 12 months. And those crossovers are now beginning to reap rewards, so that we can ensure that we've got greater join up. I still think we've got work to do with that, but nonetheless, that is improving. And we do have children and young people leading on quite a lot of quality assurance activities across the partnership. And that's always interesting. It's always good to hear from our young people what they found, what they think, and what they think we should be doing to improve things. Could I have the next slide, please? What we need to do now, continuing in Walsall, is to increase our capacity to understand the lived experience of children. So that ties in substantially with what I've just been saying about the engagement work, and be mindful of the input of wider families. Now, this ties in also with the issue of the families, the extended families of Star and Arthur, who believe and were not heard in the way that they should have been. And that's something that we need to be giving consideration to, about how we do that and how we help practitioners to do that too. And we need to be very open and honest where we have critical issues. Colleen mentioned strat meetings. We know that we have an issue around strat meetings here in Walsall. It's a high priority for the partnership to be looking at in terms of quality and quantity of strat meetings. Now, this is not just a front door issue. Strat meetings are needed every time there is a child protection issue. So this is right across the whole system. It's not just a MASH issue. And we need to be really clear that partners are all coming together at the right times to make well-informed and critical, good, safe decisions. I refer us back to the culture of confident, respectful, professional challenge. I chose those words with care. Because I think we need, as a system, to be confident enough to be able to challenge each other. But we need to do it with respect. Everyone has a professional opinion, usually based on many years of experience and knowledge and learning. All those opinions need to be heard in order that collectively a sound decision can be made. Referrals, this is the issue about the malicious referrals, isn't it? And it was a really interesting common feature of both of these cases. The issue, I suppose, is that it is easy, as Colleen said, to consider, sometimes consider referrals as malicious, and to stick with that as part of the narrative, much like the protective father became the narrative. Malicious family can become part of the narrative and requires significant challenge every time it arises as an issue. And we need to understand that. We need to learn how we talk to the referrer, how we go back to them to try and find out on the basis on which they are making those referrals, in order that we do not miss some very key and significant pieces of information that would help us make a better and safer decision. We know we'll continue to offer high quality learning and development that's available for all of you in the partnership. I won't go on about that anymore because Kellyanne will be talking to us a little bit about that in a minute. But we also need, and to confirm with you, that we will be working together as a partnership to monitor the national recommendations. not just the national recommendations from these two reviews, but also the recommendations from the care review, which also affect all the agencies attending today. The National Care Review very substantially changes or proposes changes to the system that delivers care to children and young people in earlier stages, and combined with the recommendations in this review, then there is some whole-scale system changes potentially going to happen across the service. One thing I did want to mention to you is that the ministers there's been a tri-ministerial letter that's come out from Rachel McLean, who's the Minister for Safeguarding, Will Quince, who's the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for Children and Families, and Gillian Keegan, Ministry of State for Care and Mental Health. And there are essentially 5 points that they wanted to make. One is that they are working together to safeguard children, and they recognise the effectiveness of the work that goes on at the moment to safeguard children. So they are also not saying that the system is broken. They are also saying in their letter that they recognise that they have to join together at central government in order to effect good system change. And they touched also on the care review and the joining of the recommendations from both these two reviews. And they're making a commitment to a single implementation plan following both these reviews and the care review, which will be coming out at the end of the year. So now I'm going to just hand over to Kellyanne, who's going to tell us about what training is available following on from this review that you can all have understanding of and be part of and have opportunity to link into.
Thank you, Sally. So as Sally's just said, I just want to spend a few minutes talking to you about the multi-agency learning and development that's developed and delivered across the partnership. As a partnership, when we talk about learning and development, our aim is to develop a confident, knowledgeable and curious workforce who is supported to work together. So we offer a learning and development programme to improve the quality of practice and subsequent outcomes for children. The programme reflects relevant and current information which can arise from legislation, as Sally's already said, around our Walsall's own audit practice and from our local and national reviews. The multi-agency learning develops that stronger culture of working together and gives us the opportunity to gain a better understanding of the work that we do, each of the services, our jobs, roles and responsibilities. And I think over COVID, that's hindered that aspect of partnership multi-agency learning a little bit, but we are now back doing a blended approach. We do face-to-face as well as online now. So I think one of the things that we really advocate when you come on any of the training is that you're there to learn about the subject area of the training, but also to use that time to make sure that you connect with people from different agencies and services to have that understanding and to walk away with learning something about a different organisation that you didn't already know when you walked in the room. It's necessary to offer the learning opportunities to staff across the partnership. Providing this training, it does come at a cost in terms of staff time and other resources. Therefore, it's critical for us as a partnership to make sure and to be assured that there are benefits to the training delivery and that the learning and development is making a positive impact on outcomes for service users. So we absolutely promote learning transfer back into your workplace, and we will then monitor that by future audits, because that will tell us if the learning opportunities are making a difference to your practice. So the slide that you can see on the screen is a list of learning opportunities that we've put together in response to the review for Arthur and Starr and what we are finding in our own audit learning and from our own reviews in Walsall. So I just wanted to pick up a few of the events really that are being offered. They're the titles that you can see there. We have a few events based on the child's lived experience, which we've talked about, the importance of that and how we capture and understand what it's like for that child, and to capture the voice of the child and how we record that. We've got an event around working with families who challenge professionals. So it's about looking at beyond disguised compliances, Sally said in the introduction. We've got a session on child protection medicals with a specific focus on bruising. And there is also event on the impact of family and the wider family relationships of the child. So Colleen mentioned about chronologies. So it's about looking at who else is around that child, what other family members are there that can we can continue to use, and we know what role that they play in the child's life. So all the events are going to be delivered by partners, and as you can see by the titles, the events are critical for your practice. So in addition to this, we've also got, over the next few weeks, we'll be sending out resources such as 7-minute briefings around some of the golden threads that run across all the training and learning that we offer. So we've got some around professional curiosity, sharing and seeking information, and professional challenge. So we're going to disseminate them out through email. So if you see them, please make sure that you share them across your teams and use them as part of some self-reflection within your team meetings or supervisions. You should have all received an email from me. So if you've booked on the training today, you should have all received an email from me with all the programme of events, which includes the aims of the events and the links on how to book on. If you haven't, all the learning events can be found on the Walsall Safeguarding Partnership website. You can see there's lots of learning events on there, so we don't expect everybody to attend everything, but we do want you within your organisation to think creatively of how you can access this training. So you may want to send, for example, a representative from your team to the training, and they would become the champion for that area of learning, and their role would then be to come back into your organisation and to share the learning as part of staff meetings, as part of the supervision process. I know that it's something that the health visiting team are going to be doing because they haven't got capacity to send all health visitors, for example, on all the training. So it's just about how you can think creatively about how you do that. There will also be an evaluation activity at the end of each of these learning events, and it is absolutely paramount that you complete this. It's going to help us better understand what your needs are as practitioners and people who are working with children, families and young people. And it also helps us to be able to shape our future learning and development programme as well. I know that some people think that evaluations are just a do exercise, but actually within the Safeguarding Partnership, we really look at the evaluations, and it does help to shape what we do next. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to talk you through now. We are coming to an end of the programme today. I'm going to hand you back over to Sally in a short while, but just before I do, for the final words, I'd just like you to, if you have got a mobile phone or a tablet to hand, whether it be your work or personal one, if you open the camera function, you'll be able to scan the QR code. If you click then the link, it will send you directly to the evaluation for today. I will also pop it in the chat function in a few moments. So if you've booked onto the learning event today, I've got your email address. If I've got your email address, I'm going to be sending out to you. I know a few people have asked in the chat function for a few things, but I'm going to be sending out to you the slides that we've had today, the link for the evaluation in case you can't access it through the camera function, the programme of learning which I've just gone through, and all the links of how you can book onto there will be on there. A link to the full report so that everybody's got access to the full report of Arthur and Star. And there is also, I'll send you through the link to, if there is a paper that the national panel, the National Review Panel have pulled together, which is a reflection for practitioners paper. It's a really useful document to use within team meetings. And it might be something that if you've got any managers or leaders on the call today, that you can actually target one of your team meetings around and looking at some of those reflection reflection questions. We have also recorded the event today. If you can just give me a few days just to be able to edit it, pop it on the website. We will then, probably the beginning of next week, send the link out to everybody. If you've got people who weren't able to attend today, please make sure that they secure some time to be able to listen to the video, so that they have a really good understanding of the report and the learning events that we're offering. So Sally, over to you for final words.
Thank you very much, Kellyanne. Just a few final comments from me. I mean, obviously there is an enormous amount for us all to do. There are individual things for us to be doing in terms of our practice. I would urge you to look at the reflective questions, spend some time with colleagues and team members. Don't forget respectful challenge, vigilance at all levels. Don't be averse, risk averse, and use all our learning opportunities. There's also a lot of work for our partnership to do. You've seen the framework and the structure around that and who is involved in it. I ask you to become engaged in it if you can, but we will be working very hard on your behalf to try and make sure that we cover and make sure that plans and processes and strategies, etc., cover the issues in this report and also in the care review report. I just mentioned this was one thing in the chat line about funding. The care review report in particular has a 10-year strategy wrapped around it and is asking the government for vast amounts of money. Whether or not any of that will be found, I'm not entirely sure, but it is a long-term look at how the system will be changed, and we have to recognise that system change takes time, but it starts with some very immediate personal practice. So there are issues for us all to do in different roles that we undertake as part of this. So it's just a matter of saying thank yous. Now I'd like to thank Maria, Lucy, Colleen and Kellyanne for their presentations this afternoon, and for all of you watching and listening for your forbearance in what has been a very difficult subject matter. We all hope as a partnership that you have learned and understand the key issues for Arthur and Star and the system that was there to support them, and that we'll take some learning from this into your practice and with an open mind and an open heart help us develop more appropriately the system as we go forward to protect and safeguard children in Walsall. So thank you very much everyone for your attendance and your forbearance, and ideally we will see you at another event before too long. Thank you very much everyone. Thank you.